how many people would say that they have more than a cursory relationship with fear? That fear in some way shows up in their lives on a day-to-day basis, at least. Yeah. And how many people connect, for example, I'm just noticing because somebody's coming in this door, I'm just orienting. That's one of the fear responses, is just orienting to, oh, what's happening? Oh, right. To words like anxiety. How many people have a relationship with anxiety or feeling anxious sometimes, some part of the time? Okay, it's a common human experience. And who would say that they are interested in cultivating more gentleness in their lives? And who might be interested in cultivating more kindness in their lives? Okay. So, I am hoping to deliver on those points. And if there are other things that you're interested in that I haven't talked about, please let me know now or somewhere through the talk so I can try to address those points. I'm really interested in adjusting what I have to say to what folks are actually looking for. Okay. And in this context, I would like to propose that we could regard fear, the emotion of fear and the experience of fear, as part of our natural equipment of being alive. Actually, part of what we are naturally endowed with as human beings and as animals and creatures altogether is a sense of aliveness that alerts us to danger and that keeps us safe. And that actually it's good to be safe. Right? It's actually healthy and wholesome to feel safe and to be protected from danger. And in that sense, fear is our friend. Right? And particularly when fear is accurate. And when fear is in relation to an external danger, a present moment external danger, it's usually accurate, and we can trust it. And what fear usually compels us to do is either to run away, or maybe to hide, right? Or to freeze. And there's another thing our nervous system can do in a state of overwhelm is we freeze and we kind of go limp. As part of, I'll talk a little bit about that in the trauma section. But that when we're about to be like run down by a car, it actually makes sense to be afraid and to get out of the way, right? Or when someone is actually coming at us in an attacking way, it makes sense for our nervous system to orient in a way to relate to that threat. Probably by avoiding it, right? So when fear is in relation to a present moment threat, it's actually a form of wisdom. Yeah, and so it's good. In that sense, it's good to be able to feel fear. It keeps us alive, and that's good. And being humans with complicated neural circuitry and the capacity to symbolize things that don't actually exist in the present moment, and to communicate linguistically, and to have ideas and beliefs and things like that. It's also possible for us to be afraid of things that actually are not there. In fact, it's possible for us to be afraid of things that are not real, either in the present moment or in life. Like, have you ever had what might be called worry thoughts, where you think about something and you worry about it, and because you're worrying about it, you think about it more. Because you're thinking about it more, you worry more, right? So you set up this sort of feedback loop between your thoughts and your emotions, and you can actually generate this whole neurotic spiral of fear that starts to actually seem very solid and seductive in a way, with its storyline, and persuasive in its texture and the sense of urgency about it. And then maybe later on you find out that the whole thing you were worried about is just a mirage. So, and I'm seeing some nods while I'm describing this too. It's like a lot of people can relate to this. This is a common experience, right? So in those cases where fear is not productive and where it keeps us trapped in some way, either through anxiety in a worry loop, yeah, or also in beliefs that we can have about the world. For me, for example, for a long time, and still sometimes now when I get stressed, I have some kind of pervasive underlying fear or belief that the world isn't safe, right? And while it's true that some life situations are unsafe, and while it's true that certain things happen in the world that are not safe, for the most part, my lived experience, in certain ways, has been pretty safe, right? And given I speak from a certain privileged position of being like male socialized, white, having a certain kind of upbringing and things like that, right? And even so, there was something about my sense of fear that was misplaced. I had a sense of fear of the world that was out of proportion to my lived experience. Right? And so part of that is beliefs that I had about the world. And part of it is ways that I actually turned away from myself. I actually turned away from myself and my own experience out of fear, as a way of trying to manage the fear. Is this something that makes sense to people? Okay. So this thing about treating our conditioned beliefs about the world as real and treating our thoughts as real can really set us up for a lot of fear, pain, and confusion. Right? So part of the point of meditation practice, one of the many things that it can do, is it can teach us to have a different relationship with thoughts. Right? The point is not to get rid of thoughts or to restructure thoughts. The point is simply that thoughts are thoughts, and that's all. They're not necessarily true. They're not necessarily true. And part of undoing fear and the loops of fear is being able to look at a thought and see it as a thought, to see it for what it is, rather than taking it as a real thing that we then react to and get all bound up in. Okay? So that's one of the ways that meditation practice can help us work with fear. And there are other ways too. Another way is that meditation practice can help us to notice the difference between openness, being open and wakeful, and being shut down and dull, kind of closed down. It's like the difference between an attic that's full of cobwebs and accumulated memories that have heaped up for many summers and winters, and then they just like hang out there, and there's this sort of musty smell of accumulated seasons without having been aired out. And our minds can get like that. Our minds and emotional systems can feel like that. And then it's like you do spring cleaning. You just open the windows, you sweep, you move out a few boxes, and then there's this sort of sense of lightness and expansion and possibility that can take place, right? And this attic metaphor is a metaphor for our inner experience of our minds and hearts. Yeah. And one thing that meditation practice can do, and has done for me, is it helps me to notice when I'm being in a closed down, stuffy attic with my mind and heart and in my life, and when I'm actually open to possibility. There's a qualitative difference between those two things. And for me, that qualitative difference is related to how I'm relating with fear. And when I'm relating with fear by trying to avoid fear, trying to avoid the possibility of fear and the possibility of openness, then I turn into the stuffy attic. And when I'm actually in touch with the living, breathing sense of space that comes from living my life in an open way that isn't shut down, welcome. Please feel free to sit wherever you like. Then it's like the world is my beating heart, and we breathe together. And there's a sense of openness and connection that I wouldn't necessarily notice if I didn't have a meditation practice as a reference point for that. Right? So meditation practice also serves as a reference point, and for getting to know the textures of our minds and hearts, for actually working with our experience directly, and in a sense, without confounding factors. Right? It's like if you work with your mind from a day of just sitting on a cushion versus you work with your mind after a day of like driving through rush hour traffic and drinking like 2 high octane lattes and like getting in an argument with someone and worrying about email and like almost losing your keys. You know, you have a different set of conditions that are going to change your experience. Welcome. Please feel free to sit wherever you'd like. Yeah. So that's another way that mindfulness practice helps us work with fear. Is so on one hand, undoing the apparent solidity of thoughts, and on the other hand, finding a reference point for what it feels like to actually be open to the world and for what it's like to be closed and cozy. And a word that Trungpa Rinpoche talks about in this book, in the Shambhala teachings, for the sense of cozy, swaddled, leave me alone, I'm fine in my little piece of the world quality, is cocoon. And he used the cocoon as a metaphor for the way that we weave a snug, small, separate world out of our habits and beliefs. And the way that that, on one hand, keeps us feeling safe, feeling comfortable, but it also keeps us closed off so that we can't do new things, we can't make new connections, and we live in a world that is limited unto itself. Does this make sense so far? Yeah. So meditation practice is also a way of feeling the texture of the cocoon and possibly breaking through it, possibly seeing where it is wispy and where it might be possible to start to emerge from that cocoon of habits and beliefs that come out of fear and a sense of wanting to protect ourselves, but are ultimately misguided in terms of the possibilities it creates. Because if we're a caterpillar and we spin a cocoon, that may well be part of our natural life cycle. But if it's not natural to just stay in there forever. If we want to become what we're meant to become, we need to find some way to emerge from that cocoon. And the suggestion of the Shambhala teachings is that meditation practice is a powerful way, a powerful reference point for learning how to get out of being stuck and entrapped and enwrapped in thoughts and beliefs and to move beyond them. And there's actually a Dan Siegel quote that is quite apropos about this. This is from The Mindful Brain, page 159 to 160. I'm not going to read the whole thing, just a couple of small chunks. Fear drives us to shine a focused beam of light onto what we think we must know, to keep us safe, to give us a sense of truth, of keeping the world the way we think it should be. We have words and ideas that frame and form the field of awareness, that dull our senses, shaping what we think we know in thoughts about what can be known. But the real truth is that those cognitive contraptions help structure a neural attempt to make sense of a complex world, only to then entrap us in the very structures that we have created. Right? So he's talking about we make thought forms to try to make the world manageable, and then we buy into the thought forms so much that we can't get out of it. Thought forms, behavior patterns, neural networks, whatever, the particular language or metaphor for it. We're kind of talking about the same thing here. Would you be so kind as to say that a little bit louder?
They kind of like have power over you because they become something you believe.
Totally. Yeah, your beliefs have power. The tighter you cling, the more you are trapped by them. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah, even if they're not the right beliefs.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And then he says, on the next page, he says, letting go of such top-down influences, top-down meaning ideas imposing on the world from the physically higher levels of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, the conceptual area to like top-down impose on the rest of experience. Letting go of such top-down influences is the art of mindful awareness. The receptivity of presence permits us to unleash the shackles that automatically enslave us. The fear, so often unspoken, is that without the structure, we'll lose our minds, go insane, fall prey to attackers, and die. A visceral evocation of what I think really drives that sense of fear and that need to hold on and to cling to ideas as something that is real and safe and solid about life. I think it's a very common experience. So it's a very human experience. And in my experience, and in this particular tradition, the recommendation for working with fear is to be gentle. To be gentle and also to be curious. Because if we work with our state of mind from a place of gentleness and curiosity, we can re-befriend ourselves. It's like relating to an animal that's frightened, or relating to a frightened child. The way that works to calm a child, or to be in relationship to a child who's frightened, is to be gentle and easy, and also to be curious in their experience. Dan Siegel's position about mindfulness is that one of the ways that mindfulness works is that we generate and strengthen an internal relatedness to ourselves. And we integrate neural networks and complex brain structures. And I think he's right. Like, for me, being mindful of fear and being mindful of rage and being mindful of desire and being mindful of thoughts and coming back to a present moment centered nowness, like, integrates the whole thing and makes it all connected. And I think there's this real tendency with fear to want to, like, bat it away or push it away or even, like, yell at it. Sometimes that's where I've gone when I feel afraid, is I get aggressive. And I get aggressive inside. Yeah. And the thing about it is it doesn't work. It just makes me more frightened. So for me, the question is, in a meditation context, and in an actual lived social context, and in a whole life context, how can we cultivate greater gentleness and greater curiosity towards our experience, so that those moments of fear can actually be transformed into fearlessness? And for me, the key point about that is that the energy of fear is actually life energy. And the only difference between fear and what we're calling fearlessness, here fearlessness doesn't mean the absence of fear, but going beyond fear. That's Trungpa Rinpoche's definition. The key difference is that with fear versus fearlessness, we're actually in touch with that life energy. We don't draw away from it. We stay in touch with the living, breathing thread, the bright thread of life that is at the core of fear. That we don't separate from our experience, but we stay with our hearts. We just stay gently and simply. And for me, that's actually proved to actually be the key. You know, an anecdote for me recently is being in a love relationship that's a few months in, that feels very good, is intense and wonderful in all the right ways, that make me feel wholesome and good. And repeatedly in this relationship, feeling a sense of vulnerability. And for me, what's interesting is often when I notice it, it starts with irritation. It starts with a sense of irritation towards my lover, towards my partner, and wanting to lash out in some way. And luckily, through my mind training, I've been able to cultivate strength to not lash out, to hold it, and then to actually notice what's underneath that aggression. And what I find again and again is a vulnerability. This is a way that I use my mindfulness practice in my real life, in my relationship, to keep on exploring emotions. So it takes it off the cushion and into life. And then when I notice this vulnerability, I soften. This has been my practice in the last few months, is I feel this, I soften, I notice, and then I speak to it. I talk about how I'm afraid. I talk with my partner about how I'm afraid, about how closeness and intimacy make me feel really vulnerable and frightened. And then the whole thing melts. It's like it just keeps on melting into closeness and intimacy and love. And this is my lived experience here that I'm speaking from. So from that place, I really think it's true. It's possible to take these teachings to transform fear. And the way to do it is to just be in touch with it and to have love. To have love and attentiveness and curiosity. And it's actually very, very simple. And it's very good. And part of that process is not getting caught in our storylines. and the beliefs and the patterns we weave with our minds and our thoughts, finding a way not to be like a moth that lands on the spider's web, but just to see the web in the sunlight, or when dew catches on a web and it glistens, and it's such a beautiful pattern, but to not believe, oh, that's me, or I'm a spider, I weave webs of thought, and that's my job, and I am my thoughts, but to find a different relationship to thoughts. And when a storyline is coming up that generates fear, to find a way to unstick from the thoughts and unstick from the words, to let them run their course, to let them pass as fish in a stream or waves on the water, yeah? And then find a way to be with the fear, and then also a way to be calm and safe in a way that works in the present moment, and find ways to find safety, and that's good. And the more that we do that, the more we'll find ways to step out of that cocoon. Moment by moment, we find ways of, oh, I'm stuck again, and then we notice I'm stuck, and then we find a way to be with the living breath of life, and we also find ways to keep on flowing, to keep on flowing into openness and space. And that's just a practice. Day by day and moment by moment, we gradually practice more and more how to go with the flow. And that's the path. That's what they mean by the path of meditation and the path of life, of opening to life. And so meditation is a way to cultivate this gentleness and kindness and curiosity, and being willing to show up with our mind in whatever it's presenting. Being on a cushion and having a practice, and for a lot of people sitting meditation works, and for some people other forms of meditative practices also work. And people should do what works for them. But here, sitting meditation as a practice of showing up with your state of mind and being in a relationship with it unconditionally. Actually being unconditionally interested and accepting of your own state of mind. And that is an expression of love and an expression of gentleness, and a way of cultivating gentleness. And curiously, being with yourself, noticing yourself being aggressive towards yourself, and extending acceptance and love towards yourself, even when you're being aggressive towards yourself, does the trick. Like, from the outside in, it starts to soften and make your heart workable and pliant, so that you can use it to love yourself and other people. It actually works. I'm speaking from my own journey here. My own long journey, let me tell you. But it works. It's the magic of the thing. Just showing up and being related actually works. And the other thing is that in meditation practice, we regard thoughts and emotions as just thoughts and emotions. There's no such thing as a bad thought or a good thought. And there's no such thing as a bad emotion or a good emotion. They're just thoughts and just emotions. And we cultivate unconditional presence with ourselves so that we can be with ourselves unconditionally and discover a sense of our own heart-mind as going beyond good and bad. And that actually is the basis for the path of finding something that is so trustworthy within you, that is indestructible, that's available in any state of mind, and just learning to come back to it over and over, and gradually strengthening that trust. That's the whole thing. It's the whole thing. I say, we might find in this way that the fear was just an echo, and who we really are is real, solid, and dignified, warm and bright, like the sun shining in the sky. Mm-hmm.